Are you right there, Mr. Mayor? Right. Good morning, councillors, council officers, submitters and general public. We're here this morning to deliberate and hear from submitters on the parking strategy and Ashburton Town Centre management plan. We have two submitters, and I'd remind councillors that this is an opportunity for submitters to expand on their submission and provide any additional supporting information to the submission that they've already made. I'd remind councillors that we are here to ask questions of submitters and not to get into debate. So with that, I'd invite Alistair Argyle to come and present his submission. Question?
I think you need to use the other microphone. The chair's one.
Right. Okay. You can still hear me okay, could you? Right. Okay. Sorry about that.
Whatever it is, it's red, so it must be me. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, councillors. I can confirm it is me behind the mask. I have brief submissions to add to what was the written submission that was filed. I do have copies that I'll leave for councillors and staff afterwards. In short, we are totally opposed to the proposed conversion to parking of the land at West Street between Havelock Street and the railway overbridge. At the outset, I must say that as prospective submitters, it has been particularly difficult to make submissions on this issue. First, because the description of the land and therefore its permitted use is incorrect in the district plan. That plan shows the land in question as D83, which in turn refers to a designation purportedly required by Rangitar Diversion Race Management Limited for distribution for water supply and other purposes. Inquiry of council at the end of September elicited the fact that, quote, there was an error on the PDF version of our district plan, and the area in question should show as designation 56 for rail purposes. In response to that explanation, council has been asked to explain the process that it proposes to follow in order to achieve the conversion of the land to parking. It is our understanding that underlying the designation for railway purposes is a designation for open space. And under council's district plan, open space does not permit development of a car park of the nature contemplated by the proposal. Indeed, under the zone standards for open spaces in council's own district plan, first, impermeable surfaces are limited to covering a maximum of 5% of the site area. Secondly, the hours of operation, because it faces across the road from a residential zone, are limited to 7 AM to midnight only. Again, until the process is explained, it is impossible for, and therefore grossly unfair to expect, ratepayers to submit on a proposal which at this point is vague, to say the least. Moving to the actual proposal, in relation to the possible use of the site as a car parking area, I note that in May 2010, the then Chief Executive of Ashburton District Council, Mr. Lester, issued a memorandum that traversed concerns held by council and other agencies regarding the land in question. That memorandum included various reasons as to why the site we are currently submitting over was inappropriate for an art gallery stroke museum building, or it subsequently transpired use as a car park. Mr. Lester's memorandum explained that 1. The use of the land under a licence to occupy with on-track, formerly Rail NZ, could only be for the purpose of beautification. 2. Although Ngāi who had the first right of ownership, should on-track determine the land surplus to its requirements. Discussions with Ngāi who had indicated that it did not register an interest as the land was to remain open space. 3. As part of discussions with NZTA, that agency expressed, quote, significant concern given access was only by way of entry and exit onto State Highway 1. It would engender increased pedestrian access across State Highway 1 and its proximity to the corner of Havelock Street. NZTA, I'm quoting Mr. Lester, have also indicated that they would have concerns at further vehicle entry stroke exit points on the site. Mr. Lester summarised his report by noting that effectively any one of the major issues noted above could be fatal to the proposal on the site. And I do not believe I could better sum up the concerns that ratepayers, and indeed you, Mr. Chairman, and your councillors should hold regarding this proposed and ill-conceived intended activity. The current beautified site between the Ashburton Rail Overbridge and Havelock Street on the east side of State Highway 1 is one of the few areas of the road through our town that actually has any element of beautification, and to remove that for parking purposes would be, for reasons particularly outlined by NZTA, foolhardy to say the least. It seems apparent that certain of the parking concerns prompting this proposed use of the land in question arise from Council's own decision to relocate its administration and library to Bering Square East. It would seem rather rich for Council to say that because it has created a problem, it should be entitled to desecrate the land between Havelock Street and the rail overbridge to partly remedy the very problem it has created. It would give the appearance of being one rule for ratepayers and another for Council. Surely, if Council's existing administration building is to be removed in view of the earthquake-prone deficiencies that it has, then would it not be more sensible to convert that space that will remain into a car park that would be much less disruptive for our community? One of the present councillors, when he was Mayor of the district, received advice from the first Mayor of Ashburton district that during his time, the then council had resolved to retain the current site of the Art Gallery Stroke Museum as a green area linking Bering Square West and Ashburton Domain. For reasons best known to others, that guidance was ignored, and gradually open space areas in our town are being taken for other purposes to the detriment of the overall appearance of this district, and accordingly I would urge Council to reject the current proposal. Finally, it is noted that when the consultation was reported in the news media, one councillor said, quote, Council has a good history of listening to people. I note, however, that when he and other members of the then council were presented with a petition by Ashburton Citizens Association, which contained over 4,000 signatures, was dismissed as not being representative, even though the association at that time was not given the opportunity to respond to that report. It is hoped that Council will on this occasion have learnt from its previous failure to consider a reasoned analysis and reject this proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillors.
Thank you, Alistair. Do councillors have Councillor Rawlinson?
Thank you, and thank you, Alistair, for your presentation. I have a question for you. Given that it's proposed long-term for this area here and the building next door to all be sold, which takes away any idea of having parking here, and for all the people who park here now, would you rather see them parked all around the streets around our CBD, both sides, than have them in one place in a car park?
Thank you, Councillor Rawlinson. No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting that perhaps the site to my right or behind you, that certainly part of that could be retained for parking purposes. I don't believe that it is imperative that it be sold.
I couldn't comment. I think it's in our budgets that it is, but yeah, it was just more around the preference of where would you rather see cars parked on. And we do have an issue now, especially on the east side, with all the working people who can't park anywhere except outside residential houses. And that was the point of my question: was if the spread became greater, which way would you rather see it, given that this was all sold?
Yeah. No, I'm advocating that this not be all sold, so that it can provide appropriate and adequate parking for particularly those who will be using the new administration and library building.
Thank you.
Mayor Brown?
Just another question is on the memorandum that Mr. Lester sent to the previous CEO. I'm not aware of that letter, but you've got it there. Was that on behalf of council or was that on behalf of the CEO? Do you know?
That was when he was actually making submissions in relation to the application for consent for the art gallery.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
So it wasn't something he sent to me, it was something that he presented. Yeah. Yes.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Alistair.
Yes.
It's not in your submission, but there's a lot of people making comment about the need for a parking building in Ashburton. Have you ever got a comment on that?
Yes, I am aware of that view, and I think it would be a positive step by council to take at this point. And I think it was contemplated at one time in relation to another development in town, and I think that would be a very proactive step by this council. It needn't be solely a parking building. It could have other commercial opportunities on certain of the floors as well.
Councillors have any? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, councillors, for your attentive listening to me. Thank you. I'll leave this on, Jane. Sorry.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Donna, are you ready to go?
I am, thank you.
Good morning and welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're doing 2 submissions.
I am. It was not what I had planned, but yes, I am doing 2.
So which one are you doing first?
I was asked to do the Regent Cinema submission first.
Right, okay.
Okay, thank you.
We'll let you go.
Thank you very much. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings, greetings, greetings to us all. I read with interest in the draft action plan comment to monitor parking occupancy on Victoria Street following the relocation of Library and Civic Centre. If a higher level of overflow commuter parking is observed on Victoria Street. Consider implementing time restrictions between Cass and Will Street. Both Victoria and Will Street already have 60-minute time restrictions. However, in 23 years of managing then owning our business at 211 and now 235 Will Street, I have seen this area visited by ADC parking wardens approximately 30 times. The consequence of a lack of monitoring by ADC is staff from several businesses parking in 60-minute car parks for a full day. In some cases, parked for 4 hours, home for lunch, back for another 4 hours. We recently had one vehicle parked in a 60-minute car park 24 hours a day for approximately 3 weeks straight, with no consequences and no monitoring. As an elected member, I recall being summoned to a code of conduct meeting as I had dared to ask, are council monitoring all car parks equally? As I reflect on that question, the motivation had been observing little to no monitoring of the 30 minutes in Wall Street for some 20 years. And it appears the answer to my question, are council monitoring all car parks equally, is a resounding no. They are not. If council state 60 minutes, a reasonable person then expects 60 minutes. While it is commendable and appropriate that ADC suggests this action, and I do support it, it does raise the question, do all growing and developing areas get the same consideration, or is it just council projects? For example, the ongoing of the development of the triangle businesses is excellent for the area, employment and the economy. However, it leads to greater vehicle movement and more staff seeking on-site parking. The Casual Employment Agency that I cited in my written submission has highly seasonal workers parking on the street from 7 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. Yesterday, I counted 12 vehicles parked for 10 hours. This only increases in summer months with more daylight hours, higher staff numbers, and more vehicles. There is a knock-on effect to this. Customers seeking car parks to neighbouring businesses, such as Salvation Army or ourselves, can't find on-street parking. So a Salvation Army customer will look for on-site parking on their premises, then on-street parking, and failing that, they'll often resort to the Regent Cinema car parks, which under our resource consent we must supply to customers. This leads me to a recent example of parking issues in our area. On Wednesday the 6th of October, the school holidays, it was the last day for submissions. The morning I got my written submission in, and in the afternoon I noted that the Mid-Canterbury Children's Theatre were rehearsing at the event centre. Most, if not all, of the event centre car parks were occupied from early on in the day, and ADC had a meeting at the Bradford Room for much of the day. At 1 o'clock, the meeting tackled the issue of the Ashburton Second Urban Bridge. So at 10 to 1, I chased 2 Stantec representatives from the Regent Cinema car parks. Then I witnessed a former mayor and a roading manager drive through the car park. My presence was deterrent enough, but little did anyone know that at 2 o'clock in the school holidays, we had 100 people booked in to come to the movies. So of the 20 car parks I rent, just 10 were available. I was impressed that day to see a number of council staff walk to the event centre to take up their allocated speaking slots. Yet I saw an equal number of able-bodied staff, unburdened with documentation, choose to drive, the majority in single-occupant vehicles. I heard on many occasions the people of Ashburton need to learn to walk. Couldn't agree more, and I can tell you it's 7 minutes from here to there because I just did it this morning. And I respectfully suggest that the example of walking and carpooling be exemplified by ADC as custodians and champions of the walking and cycling strategy. This morning, in preparation for an early speaking slot, I arrived at 6:45 at our business. Very few on-street vehicles, however, by 7 o'clock, there were 11 staff parked in no restricted areas on Victoria Chasm Wills, and 11 staff already parked in the 60-minute slots on Wall Street. Regarding CAN staff, a number of years back I've been party to discussions where Mr John Rooney had offered to permit CAN staff employees to use a vacant section at the rear of the Balmoral Hall. I saw little to no use of this by CAN staff employees over the years. I have asked about changing Cass Street between Wills and Peter in the past to a time restricted area, but have been told that it could not be done because it is partially residential. As a long-term resident of 262 Moore Street, just 3 doors east of the Moore Street Medical Centre, I can speak with experience to having staff vehicles parked in front of a residence for 9 hours a day, 5 days a week. We chose to move. However, had there been the option, we would have happily had time restrictions on street up front of residents. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to my submission, and I welcome any questions.
Do councillors have any questions? Mayor Brown?
Thanks, Mr Chairman. Welcome, Donna. Just a question on parking. You're saying about the parking outside the area around the cinema, and it's all blocked up, and parking there all day and every day because those people go to work, which is fine. So they need to park somewhere. If we develop the car park on between Havelock and the overhead bridge, would that be an alternative place for them to park?
Yes, it would be an alternative place. However, if you were to ask me what my preference would be, my preference and suggestion would be a parking building on the other side of town.
Have you got a specific site for a parking building outside of town?
Yes, I think that the Balmoral Hall site is an excellent location. As I mentioned, there's already vacant land directly behind the Balmoral Hall.
Would you suggest getting rid of the Balmoral Hall or retaining it and building a building beside it?
I know it's in the budget that the Balmoral Hall was originally marked for disposal. However, in the latter submission, I understand that council received money, and I imagine that that was never in the budget. Oh, I know that was never in the budget. And so that gift helps to solve other problems, such as parking. The demand seems to be on the other side of the railway, as opposed to this side.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr Chair. Morning, Donna.
Good morning.
My question regarding electric vehicle charging.
Yes.
Do you think it's a public thing like the council should supply it, or should it be private enterprise that is up to private enterprise? I mean, the council doesn't provide petrol stations, it's up to private enterprise. So I see you here, you mentioned the event centre. That would be obviously, it would be paid for by the event centre, or else the council subsidise it. What's your opinion? Should it be commercial, or should it be funded by the district council? In general, in electric car charging.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Wilson. I think there is an opportunity in this transition period for both. I think that councillors are champions for sustainability and ensuring that we go to a clean, green environment, can assist in this space. However, electric vehicle charging stations should not be limited to the responsibility of council, and it is a whole of community solution. I'm unsure if you know the arrangement we have with the car parks at the Regent Cinema. We rent the car parks from the event centre, who in turn rent the land from the council. So we are a subtenant of a leasee. However, I have spoken to Roger Farrs, the manager of the event centre, and we have talked about how useful it would be as people went to a show, if they had an electric vehicle, that they could charge the vehicle while they're in the show. But sorry, to answer your question, I think there is an opportunity for public and private engagement, but it should be a whole of community solution.
Mayor Brown?
Just a question on e-bikes, Donna. In your submission, you talk about partnership with businesses like yourselves to offer car parks and open to discuss an e-bike station. and it's already, the area is already covered by CCTV covering the area. What do you see as an e-bike lane?
So on our premises, we have had a bike stand since the day we opened the new building. So that was back in 2003. But we could easily accommodate a charge. What I mean by an e-bike station is a charging station where the bike could be recharged. That's what I imagine was meant by e-bike stations.
That's just on the minimal research I've done on e-bikes and heard, when people park their e-bikes, they take their batteries out and go with them, because if they don't, someone else probably does. So, and then they take them to their work and plug them in there. So I'm just thinking about a charging station for e-bikes, or definitely need somewhere safe to lock your bike up, but I'm not sure whether it's required for the charging of the e-bike, because I've learned they take their batteries with them. I'm not sure whether you've got any more info on that.
No, I do not, but I am aware that there are a couple of bike shops in town who would probably, as a cross promotion, like to encourage a space where people could charge if they needed to.
Thank you.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. Morning, Donna. You haven't mentioned it in your submission, but do you think there's a place for e-scooters like they have in Rolleston, Christchurch, etc. in Ashburton?
I think it's useful that we come up with solutions for all modes of transport. So yeah, I do believe there is an opportunity there.
And can you just, I've lost my place, the over 80 mobility parking policies. So you said that Invercargill have something like this. So
Yes, so that's on the Citizens Association
okay.
submission.
Right.
But yes, I did a quick Google and I saw that they've had it for some time.
Right.
Yes,
Thank
you.
Are there any? Oh, Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The submitted good morning. Mentioned about a former mayor and a officer travelling through your park.
On the 6th of October, yes.
6th of October. I got the inference from that one's not allowed to travel through there. Is that correct or is that wrong?
One can travel through,
Thank
one can travel through. I was asked if they could park. Sorry, I was asked.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Sorry. Thank you.
Are there any further questions of Donna on her role as submitter on behalf of the Regent Theatre?
Sorry, could I just clarify? It's Regent Cinema, and just may I just take it? It's okay. We've been trying for a number of years to capture the cinema name. But may I also just add that the thoroughfare is accessible to the public, but the purpose of going through that thoroughfare is looking for car parks, one would imagine.
Thank you, Donna. I'll welcome you back again in your role as giving a submission on behalf of the Ashburton Citizens Association.
Thank you very much. So firstly, the Ashburton Citizens Association would like to extend thanks to the District Council for the opportunity to submit on the draft Ashburton District Parking Strategy and Ashburton Town Centre Parking Management Plan. I do bring apologies from our chairperson, Greer Ricketts, who is unable to attend today, hence I'm presenting on her behalf. Yes, we agree with most of the objectives of the action plan for the parking strategy. EV and e-bike parking facilities and charging stations, yes. As demand increases, so too should the number of locations and charging stations provided. We do encourage Ashburton District Council to negotiate with private off-street parking providers to accommodate and host some of these facilities. To ensure parking is managed for the context, there are several locations in the outer CBD areas that could now and in the future benefit from closer monitoring and extended time restrictions. For example, Moore, Tancred, Burnett, Havelock, Victoria and Peter Streets, from Cass to William, and Cass Street, Wills Peter Street. We support the addition of drivers over 80 years to the mobility policy. We also note that Invercargill City Council have had this policy for some time, and it seems to work well for the citizens. Our recollection was that the loss of 40 on-street, 40 off-street and 9 Baring Square car parks was not adequately highlighted in previous consultation documents. May we respectfully suggest that future consultation clearly details potential knock-on effects to other areas. With limited land available for street-level parking, the Ashburton Citizens Association requests that ADC investigate a multi-storey car park building. This could be used during business hours for ADC and CBD staff, customers, clients, visitors, and after hours for hospitality events and entertainment venues, including all of the ADC events. The Ashburton Senior Centre and the Trust Event Centre. Possible locations could be the Balmoral Hall site, current ADC office site, or the current library site. While the latter two sites were earmarked for sale, we assume that the $20 million received from the COVID-19 response and recovery funds warranted a review of this funding model for the project. Are we correct? There may be funding available for a car parking building. And the present submitter suggested retaining this site, which is another option. West Street Car Park, we do not support the development of the West Street Car Park. As a group, our preference is that this remain as a green space, as it is welcoming and inviting for those travelling into the CBD. While historically ADC has gone street level and sprawled out with parking, we encourage ADC to look up with a multi-storey solution, creating more efficient land use. Of course, we would expect to use a pay component to a council parking building. We were surprised to read the funding for this has been allowed for in year one of the long-term plan, referring to the West Street extension. The development of a car park in this location, however, is subject to Kiwi Rail and Wakakato approvals. Have we understood correctly that since the 1st of July 21, the ratepayers are being rated for a development that has no agreement in place with the landowner, nor with Wakakotahi? During preparation of this submission, a video in which the Mayor stated central government had put the cart before the horse on the matter of the three waters was put out. And we'd like to point out on the matter of the West Street car park, it seems that ADC may have also put the cart before the horse. Yes, we think specific parking spaces reserved for vehicles where people have carpooled with multi-occupancy is an excellent suggestion and support this. Yes, we think restrictions need reviewing in the vicinity of Salvation Army, specifically Wills to Cass on East Street between Havelock and Walnut, and all east side streets between Moore and Peter to William. No, we do not agree with bike cages in West Street car park. We think that bike stands are adequate. Bike cages seem more appropriate to single-use venues or employer-provided for staff bikes. Yes, we're supporting investigating resident parking permits. And I just wish to add that one member of the Ashburton Citizens Association has been a resident and frequent visitor to Invercargill for many years and believes that they have some excellent examples of multi-storey car parking buildings. He cited the example of H&J Smith multi-storey car park at 92 East Street with 170 spaces. My research showed a couple of other options. Levin Street, the multi-storey car park at 17 Levin Street with 280 spaces, while the largest number of public car parks available were at the Invercargill Airport with 400 spaces. Now, I'm unsure if that's highlighting an expectation of many residents departing at the same time or a lot of airport workers. But with the airport just 3 kilometres to the CBD and easy, cost-effective modes of transport to travel from the airport to the CBD, I suggest parking there would be an option as well. So again, thank you for the opportunity to submit, and I welcome any questions.
Mayor Brown?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and welcome back again, Don.
Thank you.
At Ashburton Citizens Association, how many members do you have? How many people do you represent?
So at the moment, about 10.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Car park building, and you suggest we perhaps have one, and it be user pays, as Invercargill has got one. Do you know what it would cost for Invercargill or the other places you mentioned, what it would cost to park in one of those buildings?
So when I was looking this morning, it ranged between $2.50 an hour to $6 an hour.
Do you think the Ashburton people would park in a building with those sorts of costs?
I think as there is a growing number of professionals working in the CBD, there would be, and let's not hide the fact that you and I have sat around this table for a number of years and we saw resistance when the Eastfield parking meters went in the first instance, and it took a long time for people to warm to that idea. But now that it is there and it is heavily used, I believe that there is growing understanding and a growing acknowledgement that it's a great solution to pay display and have space.
There for that. And you mentioned in the submission the 40 off-street parking spaces lost.
Yes.
Whereabouts were they?
Oh, I took that from the document that came out.
Okay.
That was in a consultation document. The reason I highlighted it was I recall sitting here and many of us asked on several occasions how many car parks will be lost. And in fact, I've checked in with a couple of previous councillors saying, did you know it was going to be 40? And their recollection was we asked the question frequently, we got inconsistent responses, and the highest number we ever heard was less than 10. And so hence I just highlight that if 3 years down the track, all of a sudden we've lost this number of car parks, surely it would have been more transparent to tell the community right from day one when consultation was happening, here's how many car parks are going to be lost.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. I'm going back to my over 80s question. Sorry. I just had a look on the Invercargill City Council website, and so it says that ratepayers who've reached the age of 80 still have a current driver's licence, receive free parking permits, and the permit allows the holder free parking on-street meters for the time stated on the meter. So while I think that's a great idea, will that actually work in our town, because we don't have as many meters anymore?
Actually, I think the suggestion that council have come up with in your proposal is a better option for this district, and I think to encourage over 80s to use the mobility parking policy is a far better idea.
Yeah, thank you. And
thank you.
just one more question, if that's okay. Donna, there's been quite a few other submissions, and a lot of people have mentioned public transport and the lack of in town, and we all know about the My Way service down in Timaru and how well that's working. Do you think that would be supported by the ratepayers of Ashburton to have a public transport option similar to that, which may alleviate all our parking problems if it was successful?
So for full disclosure, I'm on the Community Vehicle Trust with Councillor McMillan, and I think that would be a great step, but I think it has to be a multi-pronged solution. We have this often we don't see change when it's occurring, but there is a huge amount of change happening in our district at the moment. The number of new customers who are new to the district, who are trying to find services that they had in other cities, expectations are growing. I think the number of options that we can come up with, the more we can have, the better. Yesterday, I learned of a service that I was unaware of, where there is a chauffeur service that if you own your own vehicle, a volunteer will actually come to your house. If you own your own vehicle, have third-party insurance, and they will drive you wherever you need to go, be it Christchurch, Timaru, Methven, and they actually cover both Ashburton and Methven. So I think a multi-pronged attack is the answer, but what you're suggesting is a wonderful idea.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, Donald, as has been suggested, as an alternative to asphalting the green area on the railway, that perhaps we made a car park further down the other side of the overhead bridge. What would you think of that option?
So speaking on behalf of the Citizens Association, I think the primary concern at the meeting was, even though at the moment it's the announcement that the hub was moving out came after the submissions were done. I think a beautification in that area would be useful. To have the domain across the road, which is referred to often as the jewel in the crown of Ashburton, and to have a car park right across the road, I don't think is conducive, because you then also get into the problem of having that wonderful green space, which is, in the opinion of the Citizens Association, another benefit for those visiting our district and an area of beautification. So, speaking on behalf of the Citizens Association, the mood of the meeting was they wanted beautification over functionality in that area.
So, have you got a personal opinion on that site down there?
So my personal opinion is, what is my personal opinion? I think if you're trying to solve a problem of worker parking, that end of town isn't where the problem is. So my personal opinion would be, I like the green corridor just in that couple of blocks. Yeah.
Councillor Lovett?
Just thinking of all the side streets, we want time restrictions, and I'm thinking we've got the senior centre and we've got meetings at the Bradford Room. What's your preferred, what time limits are you thinking about putting on? Half a day, or, think, just out of the box?
It gets back to the issue of, if you're going to do time restrictions, are you going to monitor it? Because at the moment, if you've got 60 minutes on Wall Street, but it's not monitored at all, then why bother? But to answer your question, what time restrictions would I suggest? I think 60 minutes is the number that should be in the area. But if the number is out there, it should be monitored. Sorry, have I completely confused with that answer, Councillor Lovett?
No, I'm thinking of meetings, people running out money in meters, but still thoughts.
In saying that we don't have meters anymore, but we do have those time restrictions, but it's just about monitoring the time restrictions, I think. Thank you.
Mayor Brown?
Yes, Donnie talked about the green space between Havelock and the overhead bridge. Nice green space, and agreed, it is a nice green space. Just across the road from that, we've got the domain, which is the jewel in the crown, as you rightly say. There's 90 acres of green space there. If people want to go to the domain, which a lot do, they struggle for parking in the domain. So having that area as a parking area, people could park there across the road and go into the domain for their green space experience. Would you agree with that as a way of having parking but still having green space?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Brown. I think that the 90 acres of land has got a lot of surrounding parking anyway, particularly Walnut Avenue along Oak Grove and around some of those residential streets on the south side. Do we need more? Most of the areas where events happen are on the Walnut Avenue near the parking, or where the cricket athletics area is up near the croquet. And so I don't know that that area of parking would actually solve the high foot traffic events anyway.
I think a lot of people park on the state highway when there's an event on, a large event on, and because there's no other place. So that's where and it's not that safe to be parking on the state highway. So would that be an alternative place for them to safely park for big events?
So I guess my question back to you, Mayor Brown, is how many events are we talking about, and what is the frequency we're on street all day? I think the 300 days a year of vehicles on street is a higher priority than 1 or 2 events in the domain.
Thanks.
Do councillors have any other questions? I just have one question to finish off with. Basically, you're in favour of the carpooling. That means we're incentivising carpoolers. How do we control them? Presumably they will have some sort of sticker on their car. Now, how are we going to control that there's only one person in that car when they travel in from Methven, but they're getting the incentive to say that they've got 2 or 3 in that car?
Oh, Councillor Falloon, you ask a very hairy question. I have, I cited in my earlier submission the examples at the Regent Cinema, and much of the parking issue at the rear of our building is based on an honesty policy where we hope that those who are pulling into the Regent Cinema car park are Regent Cinema patrons. I think you come into the same obstacles with carpooling that you are seeking honesty. The difficulty is, from my experience, not everyone is. And in fact, many just choose to find a quick solution. I know from living in big cities that there are transit lanes where they can put cameras on, they can monitor the number of vehicles, and perhaps that might be a solution. Perhaps having a camera on a carpooling car park might be, you could monitor how many pulled up.
There's definitely room, if council were going to put in another car park, to have a couple more EV stations. Not so sure about the bike EV stations, whether we had one somewhere. I don't think we need to go too overboard with those, but the other thing is we need to a lot of supermarkets in Christchurch, etc., they have EV charging stations as well, so it's just kind of getting the word out there and moving with the times, I suppose.
Councillor Latham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just slightly confused here. Are we in the process of debating the submissions, whether we agree with them or we don't agree with them? Is that what we're here at the moment, or are we just asking questions, or what is the actual state of play?
I would call this part of the deliberations.
Okay. Well, the submitters who felt there was no need to prioritise electric vehicles, I would agree with that, but I think we should acknowledge that there will be more and more of them. But at this stage, I don't think we should prioritise them, and I don't know whether it's the council's responsibility to actually provide charging stations. We don't provide fuel stations, so I'm a wee bit ambivalent about that. But I think if we build a parking building, probably would be worthwhile putting some electric vehicles in charging places there.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think we're getting the cart before the cart. If we look on page 3 of what the management have done for before us, we talk about electric charging, e-bikes, all those sort of things. I think we're jumping around too much. I thought we would start at the front page and work our way down so that when we get to the electric EV chargings, that's a specific section. I don't know what Jane thinks, but I think we're going to dive all over the place unless we stick to what the staff have provided for us, sort of.
I think through you, Mr Chairman, Emily has got a cunning plan.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I think.
Yeah, so if at this point, we're thinking about the objectives, and then the detail will fall into the action plan, which is the next sort of tables. But there is a little bit of crossover at times.
Thank you for that, Emily. I'll just let councillors know that we intend to stop at 10:15 for morning tea. So carry on, Emily, please.
Right, so is everyone happy? They've discussed the feedback on the objectives. It goes through to page 7.
Submitter, Mr. Argyle. You asked, I've told you.
Thank you, councillor. Emily?
Cool. So if there's, shall we go? If there's, does anyone want changes to the objectives? And then we'll move to the action plan after that. Everyone's happy? Happy? Cool. Right.
So basically you're taking us now through to page 8.
Yes, so
Yep.
top of page 8 is the submitters that were that high level and they just said they support the whole action plan or disagreed over. And then one there that talks about the emphasis being placed on modal shifts. And then the top of page 9, there's 3 submitters there who talk about objective A, which is the support placemaking, amenity and good urban design outcomes. Anyone?
No questions? I think we can move on to the next one.
You happy with that one? Cool. So then the actions that sit under objective B, which is around the economic development of towns, are these 4 here. So there's that first submitter who supports all of the actions under objective B. And part of this is also the supporting the addition of drivers over 80 years to the mobility policy. So there's a number of submitters there who agree with it, followed by on the next page some that disagreed with their addition. So if you've got any comments or questions you'd like to make about that? No?
Councillor Stewart, this is pertinent to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I don't like the comment on page 11. The top of page 11. It's a fairly broad statement. People over 80 should park the car in the garage.
Well, while we're talking about this.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, and I'm looking at the bottom of page 10 in the staff comment about the public transport requires funding, which we all know, but does that kind of discard any investigation into whether it would work or not?
No, I don't think you should not investigate it. The point was just made there was just that there will end up being a balance between government subsidy and local subsidy.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we're talking about free parking for over 80s, there must be some conditions in it. I mean, we can't have complete centre of Ashburton taken over by over 80s that are allowed to park there all day. I mean, there must still be, we must still have regulations, surely. Are we meaning that if they overextend their time, they don't get fined? Or what's it meant by free parking?
And through you, Mr Chair, I could answer that. I think what we're proposing is that it be the same as for our mobility parking policy. So you can park in any space for double the length of time. So if you're on a 60-minute park, you can stay there for 1 hour. And we'll have to design something that we can give to people to... Pardon?
60 minutes, 1 hour.
Oh, sorry. That was never my strong point. Well spotted. Yeah, so they get double whatever that time is, and we'll have to come up with some sort of little design of something that can go on the dashboard or whatever to identify those people so they don't get a ticket. So it's not a question of free parking because everybody's going to get free, but you can stay twice as long.
Thank you for that. Any further questions on that area?
Oh, Tony.
Oh, oh sorry, Tony.
Sorry, I was just going to go further to Jane's comment, is that we'll have to go away and look at it from a policy perspective and actually work out how the nuts and bolts of it would work. So we would be bringing that back to you for the final ratification. But if you give us the direction today that that's what you want, then it falls into our work program to get done.
So basically what we're looking at is combining mobility and over 80s into the same classification.
Yes.
Well, at least you're reducing the classifications by one. That's an improvement. Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. And I was just, after reading what was on the Invercargill about having a free parking permit or something that they stick in, so similar to a mobility card that they can use, but it's not going to work here with what Invercargill does because we don't have the meters, but yeah, something.
Councillor Lovett?
I was just going to ask, is there any way we can find out how many over 80s with driver's licences in this town? Because, I mean, I'd hate to see parks, you know, clogged up a lot. You know, what is the percentage of over 80s driving in this town? Is there...
Thank you, through the chair. No, I don't have the answer, but that would be part of the work that we would go away and do and actually understand the implications, if there are to be any adverse implications, what that would be and what a solution might be. So I guess focus today on the principle of you'd like to do something to support over 80s parking, and we think we've got an idea of how to do it, but we'll just go away and double check and do the work to make sure we've got a realistic and feasible outcome for you.
Councillor Rawlinson?
Thank you, and I certainly agree with the over 80s parking under the same terms as mobility, but also we don't want to get confused with disabled parks, because I see where there was mention from one or two submitters about the over 80s should be able to use disabled parks, but I don't agree with that, otherwise they'd clog them up. Not that we have that many of them, but just needs to be clearly defined.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. Councillor Mackay?
I totally agree with Councillor Rawlinson. There should be disabled parks, and in my opinion, just leave it so that over 80s are treated the same as everyone else. But there is that park for the people that are disabled. I think if you have disabled, over 80s, and also mobility, I think you're really going to get confusion. I strongly suggest and agree with Councillor Rawlinson, we make it simple.
Does anyone have a different view than what has been espoused by Councillor Mackay? Councillor Wilson? Oh, sorry, Councillor Latham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at the request from Age Concern, request at least 1 to 2 mobility parks per block. I think that is worthwhile looking at. I wouldn't necessarily agree 100% with it, but on a personal note, because we now have a person in our family who is not as mobile as they once were, it highlights these things, and I have to confess I was like everyone else, I never took too much notice of it until it affects you. And although there are good mobility parks around town, I think there needs to be more.
Councillor Wilson?
Thanks,
thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually think what Jane said is ideal. We have an option for people over 80 to have a sticker on their car. Not all of us over 80 will want to put a sticker on their car. A lot of people will, that's something you don't admit to at times. So, so I mean, somebody that's can't walk over 80, it'll be a great thing to give them twice the time period. But it'll be a purely optional thing, and I can't see everybody having an over 80 sticker on their car.
I think that's very pragmatic, Mr. Wilson. Mayor Brown?
What's the difference between a mobility park and a disability park?
Yeah.
Or is it the same?
Same.
Tony?
Thank you, through the chair. So it is the same. Right now, people who do have a mobility parking permit, they can actually park anywhere for an extended period of time. So it's not restricted to just having to be in a mobility car park.
Right. Okay.
So we might want to just ask, is there a majority view that you favour having the over 80s?
Is there a majority view that we have the over 80s as a separate classification, or perhaps take the view of Councillor Wilson where if you want to go for an over 80s, would that then be the same as a mobility car park? Councillor Mayor Brown?
I'd like to include it in the action plan, and the policy will determine what is in the body of it, as to who over 80 and what and etc.
Councillor Mackay?
I think, Mr. Chairman and councillors, we're wrong to determine it by age. I think we should determine it by mobility, or by whether you can walk or you need a special park to get the wheelchair out or whatever. I think we should do it by circumstance, not by age. That's inferring that all those over 80 that have got a sticker can't walk as far as someone under 80. That's not fair.
Mayor Brown?
And we can do that, as a question to staff, can we do that, what the Councillor Mackay's talking about, within the policy?
So the mobility parking permits that people can apply for is not limited to age, it's limited to disabilities. So the people that you're talking about will be covered by that policy which is already in place. Yep. The issue of over 80s is just that their disability may not come under that policy as such. It's more that they're potentially walking a bit slower and just need a bit more time.
Councillor Rawlinson?
Yes, I just agree with, and as I said before, keep it simple. And, you know, we made swimming free for over 80s at the pool, and no doubt that's made very simple by having just a sticker or a card or whatever they take to the pool. I haven't reached over 80, so I don't know. But the thing is, to keep it simple, I know under mobility, from sitting on the Total Mobility Committee, you don't just get a mobility card easily. It's got to be signed off by a doctor, etc. So the thing is, with over 80s, yes, I agree with giving them twice the length of parking in Ashburton, but we've got to keep it simple as to how we do it.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, do we get double parkings, or is it the same parking we're talking about? Mobility parkings are to be used by people with a card and over 80s. Or do we get separate one for mobilities and separate one for over 80s? So we start losing more parks for other people? Or how is this going to work? Can someone explain to me? What is the idea?
Tony?
Thank you, through the chair. So perhaps what would be a simpler solution from here is if we leave this in the action plan, as a team we'll go away and do the work at the various options of whether it's dual with mobility parking or it's a separate over 80s parking that can access the car parks for a longer period of time, and we'll weigh up the costs and benefits with those and bring that back to you for a council decision.
Yep. I think
that's great.
Good outcome. Okay, since we've come to an outcome on that one, it's probably a good time to stop for morning tea, and we'll be back at 10:30.